So we have seen finite difference method as of now. In finite difference method, the data or variables that you're interested in will be stored at grid points in the discretized domain. So you basically discretize the fluid domain into some points, and in those points you calculate your values that you're interested in. So this is what is finite difference method. So finite volume method is wherein you discretize the domain into some cells or volumes. Like instead of discretizing the domain into points, you discretize them into cells or volumes. And in here, the data are stored at either cell centers or at vertices. So for each of those cells, control volume analysis will be done and you derive your finite volume update formula. Like how control volume analysis is done for your physical domain, and the PDEs, the governing equations, are obtained from the control volume analysis. In a similar way, to each cell here, control volume analysis will be done and your update formula will be derived. So this is what is finite volume. Because control volume analysis is done for each cell, we ensure discrete conservation for each cell. So we'll see all that here. So last time I have told that I'll be talking about CFD for incompressible flows. I'll be going through some of the methods I told. But I thought that we need to first start with finite volume method, and then we'll look at those CFD methods for incompressible flows from the finite volume point of view as well. So I thought it's better to introduce finite volume method first. So we'll go to that later. So today we'll be seeing finite volume method and the details of it. Yeah. So let's just start with a simple 1D physical domain. So this white line is your physical domain, and in that physical domain is now split into some cells. So these each of these what things are cells. So a green box is represented by a cell, and these blue lines are cell interfaces. So cell interfaces are those boundaries that separate two cells. So these blue lines are cell interfaces, and this red dot is the cell center. Data will either be stored at cell center or at cell vertices or interfaces. So primarily we'll be looking at the finite volume method from the point of view of storing data at cell centers. So I have told that we'll be doing control volume analysis for each of those cells. So primarily finite volume method starts with integral form of conservation law, where control volume analysis is done for each cell in the domain. So, whereas finite element method starts with weak form of conservation law. During PDE classes, we saw what weak form is, and we also saw weak solutions. So finite element method essentially starts with the weak form of conservation law, and for that we'll be finding solutions. Here, finite volume method starts with the integral form. Uh, so your governing equation will, that is your finite volume update formula, will be derived from the integral form or conservation form. So basically, let us look at it first from the point of view of physical domain. So let's consider just a big physical domain that you're interested in. So that is omega, and you draw a control, you consider a control volume. I mean, just that same physical domain is the control volume as well. So it's a fixed control volume. That is around the physical domain that you're interested in. So that is omega, and the boundary of that control volume is gamma. So this control volume is actually around this physical domain. So basically, if the physical domain moves, then your control volume moves along with the physical domain. So control volume is just fixed on the physical domain, but wherever it moves, the control volume will also move. So it's such a construction. So for that, any change inside the control, any change in some quantity inside the control volume, rate of change of some quantity inside the control volume, that quantity is U. So rate of change of that total value of that quantity inside the control volume is denoted by this expression. That is equal to the flux of the quantity. That is, some quantity will be moving out through the boundary. So flux of U through that through the boundaries of the control volume. So flux of U is actually G. So when I take G dot N, we are considering only those normal components that go out through the boundary. So that so rate of change of that quantity is equal to the rate of outflux through the control volume. So this is something that you actually know of already. So I just want to introduce this first, and then we'll see how control volume analysis is done for a finite volume or a cell, any small cell in the finite volume method. So for a one-dimensional control volume, so let's just consider a 1D physical domain which is divided into some control volumes. So we have three control volumes with three cell centers, xj, xj plus 1 and xj minus 1, and xj minus half and xj plus half are the cell interfaces for the cell xj. So this is now a physical domain has been split up into three control volumes here. So the actual profile of U in the physical domain will be continuous. So it will be defined at each and every point. So that is this green curve. That is the actual profile of U. So how will you store the value of U in the finite volume method is that you actually store only at the cell centers. So only at these points you will be having some value for you, these points xj minus 1, xj and xj plus 1. So what value of u will you be storing there is that actually the profile is different, but the value that you will be storing at the cell center is an average of the whole value of u inside this whole cell. So average of this green line is your blue line. It's actually average of your green line in this cell is your blue line in this cell, and average of your green line in the next cell is the blue line in that cell. So it goes like that. So this allows for discontinuities. If we notice, these blue lines are not continuous. These are like step functions only. So we have some discontinuities at the cell interfaces because we are taking average of value of u in that cell. Then it will be just some constant value, but in the next cell it will obviously be some different constant value in most cases. So you will have some discontinuity coming there at the cell interface. So this is the construction for 1D control volume. Next, let's just consider one control volume over here, that is this control, the middle one. And for this control volume, let's now get the finite volume update formula. Let's just do the control volume analysis for this cell and go about getting the finite volume update formula. So the same like what we did for the usual case, the physical domain, like how we do in fluid mechanics. Now let us do it for this small control volume in your physical domain again. This is just a small part of your physical domain. So for this separately, now you're doing a control volume analysis. So which is this one. So this whole domain, the omega runs from xj minus half to xj plus half. So this is your whole domain. So rate of change of your total value of u in your domain is given by this expression, and the flux through the interface is given by this. Since your domain boundary is not continuous, it's just 2 points, right? So you are just taking something. So g dot n here will be at this interface, your so at this interface, the normal vector will be in this direction, whereas at this interface, the outward normal vector will be in this direction. So G dot n is going to be positive for this point, and G dot n will be negative for this interface. So you have G at xj plus half minus G at xj minus half. So this is your interface flux, the flux going through your interface for this control volume. So this is now an update formula. So now you can, in this expression, you can just approximate this by your cell average. Basically, in finite volume, I told that at the cell at the point xj, you will be storing only uj bar, which is the blue line and not this green line. So an average of this quantity, integral u dx, an average of that will be uj bar. So you're calculating the average of that quantity, the cell integral average, which is uj bar. You're calculating uj bar from this integral. So which is average of the whole u. So integral u dx by delta x, since delta x is the length of your physical domain, which is actually the volume in 3D. So this will be your cell integral average. And now let us substitute this cell integral average back in our old expression. So in this place, we'll be getting uj bar delta x, and we have the fluxes. So now if you look at this, this is just an ODE. It's an ODE with only d by dt of uj bar. On the right hand side, we have a finite difference kind of equation. We have some central differencing on the right on here. So just we need to just find some way to approximate this quantity, then we'll have an update formula. So this is now the finite volume update formula for 1D case. So now since this is an ODE, you can use either Euler method or RK methods to further solve this equation. And these quantities can either be, this flux quantities can either be used at time step n or at time step n plus 1. When it's at time step n, your scheme will be explicit. When these are at time step n plus 1, your scheme will be implicit. So it's still in your hand to decide whether to go for explicit scheme or implicit scheme. So based on how you discretize this part, you will be getting some equation. Usually people go for forward Euler method, which is an explicit method. So this is the forward Euler approximation. So this quantity d by dt of uj bar has been written as a forward Euler approximation, and we have this these fluxes here. So now in this expression, these quantities are cell integral averages. You have uj bars, whereas on the other side you have your fluxes evaluated at the cell interfaces, and these are g of u's. These are not g of u bars. These are actually g of u's evaluated at interfaces. So now we told that we only store the value of u bar at the cell center and not at the interface. So we do not know what these values are going to be at the interface. Suppose if we had known what u bar will be at the interface, then we could have evaluated this g of u bar from that value, because we already know what g of u will be from our governing equation itself. So from that form of g of u, we can obviously evaluate the value of g of u bar at the interface. But now, since we are only storing the value of u bar at the cell centers and not at the interfaces, we need to somehow find some way to evaluate these fluxes at the interfaces. So finite volume method is all about this. So people have constructed different schemes to evaluate this g of u bars differently. So that way you get different methods. With the difference in how g of u gets evaluated, you have different schemes. So this is it. And some people do reconstruction of fluxes from both left and right states. So at G at xj plus half will depend on both xj and xj plus 1. That is u at xj and u at xj plus 1. So g of xj plus half we'll use both u bar j and u bar j plus 1 to evaluate g at xj plus half. That is what is telling. That is what is about. Talking reconstruction of fluxes from left and right states. You use both left and right states to evaluate the fluxes. And one more thing is piecewise polynomial approximation. So as of now, we have only talked about approximating this flux u by a constant value u bar j minus 1, but you can have different kinds of approximation as well. So you can have a polynomial which goes up to the powers up to some random n. So you have a plus bx plus cx squared plus dx cube and so on. So now in this polynomial, suppose if you had approximated only up to the first value, that is if you just take p of x equals a, you get a constant value for u bar. So that is this blue, those are these blue lines. So when you approximate your u by some constant value u bar, you get these blue lines. Whereas if you approximate your function u in the cell by some linear function a plus bx, then you get some linear functions, and you store this linear function in your cell center. So that way this is surely a better approximation than a piecewise constant approximation. But anyways, whatever approximation you take, you will always have discontinuities, because it's an approximation. So at the cell interfaces, you will always have discontinuities. So any doubts as of now?
No, ma'am.
Fine. So increase in degree of polynomial will always increase your accuracy. So now piecewise polynomial approximation, as said earlier, will allow for discontinuities at your cell interfaces. But suppose if you have a shock or some kind of discontinuity in your physical problem itself, then that discontinuity has to sit at the cell interfaces and not inside the cell itself. Because inside the cell, we are assuming smoothness and we are doing control volume analysis, which means that when we are allowed to do some control volume analysis, you assume inherently that your value of u is smooth. That is, the variable that you're interested in is smooth, and then you go about doing control volume analysis. So this assumption is inherent there. So you cannot allow for discontinuities inside the cell. So in any physical problem, if you have discontinuities somewhere over here, that will essentially go to the cell interface only. So your discontinuities are always assumed to sit at the cell interfaces. So this is one thing that you need to keep in mind. So next, after this piecewise polynomial approximation, let us look at how fluxes are reconstructed at the interfaces. So for this, let us just take this kind of approximation. G of u at xj plus half has contribution from both xj and xj plus 1. So you just take an average of both of those. So you just take half of g of u at j and half of g of u at j plus 1 and add them. So this is your contribution. That is, you just take half of the contribution from left state and half from the right state. The same goes for g of u at j minus half. Here again, you take half from the left and half from the right. So now let us use these expressions in our update formula. That is, this was our formula, right? Plus we did forward Euler approximation. So now this is our finite volume update formula. So in this formula, let us just substitute the expressions that we just considered for the fluxes at the interfaces. So here now I've just substituted these quantities. So instead of g at j plus half, I've substituted this expression, and instead of g at j minus half, I've substituted this. So now these two quantities will go off and you'll have something like this. This is actually an FTCA scheme, right? This is forward in time and this is central in space. So, and also for linear convection equation or any hyperbolic equation, FTCA scheme is unstable. So this is something we have seen earlier. So we saw that FTCA scheme is unconditionally unstable. That is, we cannot even put any conditions to make it stable. So always it's unstable. So there is no point in constructing such a scheme. So we cannot use this scheme to solve and find answers to our solutions. So basically, if we make this kind of approximation, that is, if we consider our g at j plus half and g at j minus half as these quantities, then there's no point in using that scheme at all because it's an unstable scheme. So why is this happening? So mathematically, central differencing, that is central scheme, has zero diffusion. So the first term actually, first term in the truncation error here is dispersion and not diffusion. So it has zero diffusion. So that will not make the scheme stable. So that will necessarily disrupt stability. So physically what is happening is for hyperbolic systems, we had characteristics. So for hyperbolic PDEs, we can essentially draw characteristics in the xt plane, and our solution actually propagates in just one direction. So one specific direction, according to the slope of the characteristic, your solution will propagate in some specific direction. So it's just uh, hyperbolic PDEs are evolving in some specific direction, whereas here in when we do central differencing, we are taking information from both the sides, so which is actually not physical because the solution is evolving in just some specific direction, either to the right or to the left, depending on the slope of your characteristics. But here we are not considering that, and we are just taking some average of both left and right states. So that is why it's not working. So now to overcome this, what can we do? So we can either reconstruct the fluxes using upwinding. So we have reconstructed the fluxes initially by just taking an average of left and right states. So instead of that, we can also use upwinding to reconstruct the fluxes. We saw what upwinding is earlier. That is, you consider the direction, that is the slope of your characteristics, and depending on that you just take either the left state or the right state. So we saw, right, when the wave speed is positive you go for backward differencing, and when your wave speed is negative you go for forward differencing. So likewise you can do something here. So instead of taking an average of left and right states, you can go for upwinding, wherein you just take either of those quantities depending on your slope of the characteristics, or you can either add numerical diffusion. uh, we can just add numerical diffusion because central differencing has zero diffusion. So to our already existing central differencing, we can just add some numerical diffusion. This kind of expressions lead us to some central difference in space. So if we add some quantities such that we get some numerical diffusion term here, then it's fine. So we can go in that direction as well. So now let us try the second one, wherein you add some numerical diffusion to to our already existing central differencing in space. So our expressions for fluxes at the interfaces become something like this. So we already took some average of left and right states initially. So G at J plus half is half of G at J plus G at J plus 1, plus you add some quantity. You have this minus half at alpha J plus half into Uj plus 1 minus Uj. Similarly, for G at J minus half, we add another quantity, which is a backward differencing. So here we have a forward differencing in space, and here we have a backward differencing in space. So now let us use these expressions for fluxes at interfaces in our finite volume update formula. So this was our finite volume update formula. We had this forward in time, and we had G at J plus half minus G at J minus half. So let's just substitute these quantities here. So here again we have this cancellation, and we got this central difference term plus some numerical diffusion plus some other term. We'll interpret this as numerical diffusion here. So let us just define alpha as something. Alpha j plus half equals alpha j minus half. That is, let's just take that alpha is some quantity that is same throughout the domain, and that is equal to 2 nu by delta x. Nu is some coefficient of viscosity. Here it's artificial viscosity and not physical viscosity. So it's in our hand as to how much viscosity to take. So let us just define alpha in this way and substitute it over here. That when we do that, this expression becomes something like this: nu into some central differencing for dou squared u by dou x squared. This is essentially an approximation of dou squared u by dou x squared, right? And this is actually a numerical diffusion term. Nu dou squared u by dou x squared is a numerical diffusion term. It's actually diffusion. Since we have brought it into the picture, it's numerical diffusion and not physical diffusion. So to an unstable scheme, we have added numerical diffusion, and now this will be stable. Yeah. So this is how you add numerical diffusion and solve the problem of instability. So on the other side, we can do appending. I've told that we can have two different solutions. One is adding numerical diffusion, and the other is reconstructing the fluxes using appending. So now let us go for the second one, where we reconstruct the fluxes using appending. So any doubts as of now?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So here for appending, let us just consider a linear convection equation. So we have this dou u by dou t plus c dou u by dou x equals 0, and we have seen this initially. So if c is greater than 0, then your waves are moving in the positive direction. So if you are at some xj, you will be influenced by xj minus 1, since your wave is moving in the positive direction. So you need to take backward differencing, that is u at xj minus u at xj minus 1, because you are being influenced by xj minus 1 when you are at xj. So and if you have c less than 0, then your wave is moving from right to left. So when you are at xj, you are influenced by xj plus 1, so you go for forward differencing. So this is something we have seen earlier. So now c need not be constant for any physical problem. C can also be varying in your physical domain. So in that case, will you go for forward differencing or backward differencing? So the when C switches sign inside your physical domain, you need to switch your scheme as well, depending on the sign of C. So in order to make that switch comfortable, we define C to be C plus plus C minus. That is, C plus is C plus mod C by 2 and C minus is C minus mod C by 2. So whenever C is positive, your C plus will be positive and C minus will be 0. And whenever C is negative, your C plus will be 0 and C minus will be C itself. So this way you're taking care of both positive and negative wave speeds. So you're splitting some quantity into an always positive quantity and an always negative quantity, and some of those will always be equal to C. Okay, so C equals C plus whenever C is greater than 0, and it's equal to C minus whenever C is less than 0. This is evident from this definition itself. This definition leads us to this point. Just by defining C plus mod C by 2 as C plus, it's always a positive quantity. C plus mod C by 2 will be equal to C when C is greater than 0, and C minus mod C by 2 will be equal to 0 when C is greater than 0. Similarly, it goes when C is less than 0, that is when C is negative, C plus mod C by 2 will be 0 and C minus mod C by 2 will be C itself. So this way the splitting gets taken care of, and now you substitute C as C plus plus C minus. So when you substitute this back into your linear convection equation, you get an expression like this. So now you can see, since C plus is a positive quantity, for here we can do backward differencing, and since C minus is a negative quantity, you can do forward differencing here. So this is now a scheme which takes care of any change in sign of C in the physical domain, and it does forward and backward differencing accordingly. So whenever C is positive, this part will be this part only will be there in the equation, and this part will be 0. And whenever C is negative, this part will be there and this part will be 0. So it essentially gets taken care of. So this way we do upwinding, and this type of splitting is known as Courant splitting. So now for this kind of an upwind scheme, let us do, we have seen how to do modified PDE or equivalent PDE analysis. So here I'm not doing the analysis completely. I'm just writing down the final expression that we may get in the modified PDE analysis. So, I mean, is that okay? Is it fine to go this way?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, yeah, we have seen, right, last time, you just write approximate each of these quantities here by Taylor series expansion and just combine them all in a way that you get the left hand side of your governing equation is here, and on the right hand side you have some truncation error terms. So these are the terms, truncation error terms, and the first term is the numerical diffusion term because it has those second, it is an even order derivative of u, and the next term is the numerical dispersion term because it's an odd order derivative of u. So now this is our numerical diffusion. So for stability, we require this diffusion coefficient to be positive. So this part is our diffusion coefficient, mod C delta x by 2 into 1 minus mod C delta t by delta x. So we want this quantity to always be greater than or equal to 0. So for to ensure stability. So this quantity will be positive only when mod C delta t by delta x is less than or equal to 1, because this is always positive and we want this to be positive, and this is positive only when mod C delta t by delta x is less than or equal to 1. So this is now our conditional stability criterion for the upwind method that we are considering. So this is our first order upwind method, and for that this is our stability criterion. So essentially this can be interpreted in this way. So mod C delta T is less than or equal to delta X. So we have looked about characteristics previously. You need to connect that over here. So this is our physical domain, xj plus 1 and xj minus 1, and this is at time t. And this is our the same physical domain at time t plus delta t. So initially, earlier when we were at PDEs, we were drawing our xt plane, and here we were drawing the characteristics in some way. So these were our characteristics when we were in the xt plane. So now I'll just remove these characteristic curves and let's just be in the xt plane itself. So this is the part of the line that I have drawn over here, and this is the part of the line, the next line. I mean, this is at some t plus delta t, and this is at some t, and these are the same physical domains. So I'm just drawing these two lines from the xt plane, and between these lines I'm drawing the characteristics, like how we drew the characteristics initially in some way. Those characteristics are now drawn here between these two lines alone. It is just between these two lines I'm drawing the characteristics. These red and green lines are the characteristic curves. So these two pictures are actually equivalent in one sense. So let us, for this problem, dou u by dou t plus c dou u by dou x equals 0. The solution will be something like, this is a linear convection equation, and your solution u of x comma t will be something like u naught of x minus ct, right? So the solution at some t plus delta t will actually be equal to the solution along the characteristic that passes through this point xj at some previous time. So actually, when we said we are drawing characteristics, then any solution at this point will actually be equal to the solution at this point and then the initial condition itself. So you just move your initial condition to some different time and some different location as governed by your characteristics, and then you find the solution. So this is how we were finding the solution for our linear convection equations initially. So now through this point xj, we will be having some characteristic passing through it. Either of these. I mean, physically we will be having either of these red lines depending on the sign of c. So if c is greater than 0, we'll have uh, this red line, and if c is less than 0, we'll be having this red line. So it's one of these only will be passing through this point xj, not both of them, and it depends on the sign of c. Okay, I've just represented both of them here. And physically the either of these red lines will be passing through your point xj, and now that point xj is here, and you have some that this is, if suppose this is the characteristic that is passing through xj, then at t it passes through this point, which is xj minus mod c delta t. So at t it passes through this point. So now value of u at this point is equal to the value of u at this point xj. Okay, so this region is now your analytical domain of dependence. So since your physical equation is governed by this c, and these are the characteristics that can pass through the point xj. So now the value of xj is actually determined only by these 2 points. If suppose your initial condition had some velocity as well, then it will be governed by this whole region as well. So this is basically your analytical domain of dependence. I mean, all these we have seen when we were talking about when we started with hyperbolic PDEs some time back. So this is essentially the same. We have seen domain of dependence and a region of influence and all. So here it's essentially the concept of domain of dependence. So the value of u at xj will be dependent only on u at this u from this region. So now this is your domain of dependence. This is actually you're calling this as analytical domain of dependence because physically only this region will be influencing. But in our numerical scheme, what we are doing is to find this xj, we are using these points as well. So basically, this is our numerical domain of dependence. So this is delta x, right? Whereas this region is mod c delta t, whereas this whole region is delta x. So mod c delta t less than or equal to delta x. This condition ensures that your analytical domain of dependence is less than or equal to numerical domain of dependence. So the significance of your stability condition is this. It ensures that your analytical domain of dependence always is less than or equal to the numerical domain of dependence. So from here we can get to this point as well. We can just evaluate this expression from there. Delta x by delta t will always be greater than or equal to mod c. So from this, what we are seeing is this is our numerical wave speed and this is our physical wave speed. So mod c is the physical wave speed. I mean, and delta x by delta t is your numerical wave speed. So this condition ensures that your numerical wave speed always is greater than or equal to your physical wave speed. So essentially it's a condition on delta t or delta x. So if you suppose fix delta x, then you need to choose delta t such that this condition is satisfied. So delta t must always be less than or equal to delta x by mod c. So this can also be written as delta t equals epsilon delta x by mod c, where epsilon lies between 0 and 1. So epsilon is actually our CFL number and it is usually chosen as 0.9 to have less diffusion and better stability. Any value of epsilon in this region always ensures stability, but a low value of epsilon will make your scheme more diffusive. So you always choose a higher value such that you get a good result. That is, you get low diffusive and stable result. So this is the significance of your CFL number. So in upwinding, we just it's just some diversion from the finite volume method that we were talking about. In upwinding, you have some features. So these are some features of upwinding specific to linear convection equation. So now let us just look about conservative form and non-conservative form. So this is our first is the linear convection equation in conservative form. So this is our equation in conservative form. So conservative form, you call that some equation is in conservative form when you can write it in such a form where you have some dou by dou x of some flux instead of having dou dou by dou u of flux into dou u by dou x. If you have it like dou by dou x of flux totally, then you say that your equation is in conservative form. So this is actually a conservative form and this is non-conservative form, but both are equivalent. Okay, always you can take in this expression also, since c is a constant, you can always take c inside the derivative, and these both equations are equivalent. So basically for linear convection equation, conservative form and non-conservative form are essentially the same. Here, by looking at the value of C, we can do upwinding. But how to do it for any nonlinear conservation law? That is, if you have some nonlinear conservation law like this, dou u by dou t plus dou by dou x of g of u equals 0. So now this is a nonlinear conservation law. This is in conservative form. So here, to make it in non-conservative form, you write it in this way: dou u by dou t plus dou g by dou u into dou u by dou x equals 0. So this is a non-conservative form of the same equation. Here, these are, although these may seem equivalent, but if we suppose start with this equation in our finite volume framework, this we cannot do an integral form. This is not obtained from the integral form of the conservation law, whereas this equation is obtained from the integral form of conservation law. Suppose if we are splitting it here, if we are doing this chain rule operation here and making the equation to be in non-conservative form, then we are essentially losing conservation. And in finite volume, our primary motive was to, ensure conservation inside each and every cell. But if we use this equation, then we are not ensuring conservation in each and every cell. We'll also be adding some source term, and we'll have problems like the shocks being captured in a wrong position. So these things will occur when you're not using a conservative form of the equation. So, but when you are in the conservative form, it's difficult to do upwinding. So in previous case, you looked at the value of C and you differentiated dou u by dou x accordingly. You either did backward differencing or forward differencing depending on the sign of C. But here, how will you do upwinding is a question again. So search for this also led to the development of finite volume method in the direction of upwind schemes. So this is one major question that will be addressed in the upwind schemes domain of finite volume method. So next, we'll be looking at these things in detail later. I mean, we'll look at some schemes specific to do upwinding. That is, we have flux splitting methods. So we'll look at those things in detail later. So next, one another feature of finite volume method is discrete conservation. So here we have already talked about conservation from the some time back. Like from the starting of this lecture, we have been talking about conservation only, because in finite volume method you start with the integral form or conservation form, and then you ensure that conservation is happening inside each and every cell. So we'll look at it in more detail. Like conservation in each and every cell will lead to conservation in your whole physical domain. So that is what we'll be seeing here. So in we call it as the discrete conservation, or because that is obtained through telescopic collapsing of fluxes. So we'll see what is that in detail. So this is our finite volume update formula. So forward in time, and the fluxes are at the interfaces j plus half and j minus half. So you have something like this. So now this is your finite volume update formula for each and every cell. Let's just sum this over the whole physical domain for any xj belonging to omega. So suppose if this white line is your physical domain, that physical domain is now being split up into some cells. These these two blue lines together constitute one cell, and this green point 1 is your cell center. Okay, and 1, 2 up to n are cell centers, whereas 1 by 2, 3 by 2 up to n plus half represents cell interfaces. So now we are summing. The first equation is written for just one cell, and now that is being summed for the whole physical domain. We are just doing a summation over xj. So we are essentially summing these equations for each and every cell and writing it as just one equation. So now this summation can go inside over here, and it can go inside these quantities as well. Here I am writing it as just summation over uj bar at n plus half, n plus 1. So now this is essentially the total value of uj bar in this whole physical domain at n plus 1th time step, and this is the total value of uj bar in the whole physical domain at nth time step. And here the fluxes are written in this way. So here, since you have j plus half and j minus half, you first, for the first cell when you write, it will be g at 3 by 2 minus g at 1 by 2, and for the next cell it will be g at 5 by 2 minus g at 3 by 2, and just this g at 3 by 2 can get cancelled with just this 3 by g at 3 by 2. Similarly, all of you'll have all cancellations, and just this first point and this last point will remain. So you'll have g at n plus half minus g at half by delta x. So now this is essentially the outflux and influx for the whole physical domain. So these were actually the outflux and influxes for just one cell. When you just summed over it, all of the intermediary fluxes got cancelled. This process is called telescopic collapsing of fluxes. The fluxes get collapsed with fluxes between cells get collapsed when you just combine them. So finally you will end up only having the fluxes at the interfaces, at the boundaries of your whole physical domain. So that is gn plus half and g half are the boundaries for the whole physical domain. So essentially you end up having only these fluxes, and this is the rate of change of your u bar in the whole physical domain between two different times, n and n plus half, n plus 1, and that rate of change of your u bar between these two times is equal to the outflux through the boundaries. So now this represented local conservation inside each cell, whereas this equation now represents global conservation. So global conservation is happening because local conservation is ensured in each cell by using this integral or conservation form. So now this feature is unique to finite volume method. We don't have this in finite difference or finite element method, and because of this we use this finite volume method for CFD problems, because in CFD conservation is inherent, because in the governing equations of CFD are derived from the conservation laws, that is from the conservation form. We start with the integral form, then we derive the governing equations. So those are essentially conservation equations. We have conservation of mass, momentum and energy. So those are essentially conservation equations, and finite volume method also is derived from the point of view of conservation of some quantity. So this works well for CFD, fluid problems. Finite volume method works well for fluid problems because of this reason. So one more reason is that you know, shocks are captured at exact location. This is actually shocks. Shocks are actually captured at exact location because of conservation. Not exactly at the same location. You know, they are still captured at the cell interfaces only. If you have two cells, if suppose your shock is here, that will be captured only at this point, not at, you know, suppose your shock is there in this, suppose you had a shock over here, you will essentially be calculating, making it sit over here only in finite volume method. And this has an error of, you know, this error will always be less than or equal to delta x by 2, I guess, because you know, this is your cell interface. So suppose a shock had been over here, that will go to this interface. So any shock in this region will go to this cell interface only. So the error is always less than or equal to delta x by 2. So you know, because of this reason, I mean exact in the sense I'm just talking up to this error, exact up to delta x by 2. So shocks are essentially captured correctly, at least close to delta x by 2 because of conservation. Suppose if we did not have conservation, shocks will move to some 2 or 3 cells away. It can go to some 2 or 3 cells away from the actual point if we did not have conservation, because your equation will essentially have a source term as well, and you're solving a totally different equation, so that will move your shock to a different location. So because of conservation, you are at least able to capture shock close to up to delta x by 2. So this is because of conservation. And you know, also we have seen about Rankine-Hugoniot conditions when we were dealing with PDEs. So those were like, you know, to capture the location of the shock, you use a Rankine-Hugoniot condition. That is basically the speed of the shock is evaluated from the Rankine-Hugoniot condition, which is derived from the integral form of conservation law. So from the integral form of conservation law, okay, basically what we did earlier was, if we have a shock, we construct a control volume around it, and we assume piecewise smoothness either to the left and right of the shock. And we did control volume analysis for this region, and we essentially evaluated the speed of the shock. And this was like difference in flux by difference in conserved variable itself. So this is some expression that we obtain by making this derivation from the integral form of conservation law. So essentially this is the speed of shock. So speed of shock is obtained from this expression, and from this expression we can further calculate the location of shock. If we suppose know the previous location, we can obviously find the current location of the shock using this expression. So you know, because all of these are derived from the integral form of conservation law, Rankine-Hugoniot condition can easily be satisfied here. This is known as the Rankine-Hugoniot condition. So since this is also derived from integral form, and finite volume method also uses integral form, Rankine-Hugoniot condition can easily be satisfied in finite volume method. So this is it. So one question to you guys. Can conservation happen in a region which is a proper subset of a cell? So now you consider some region which is smaller than your cell, which is a proper subset of cell. So in that region will you have conservation? We have talked about global conservation. That is, in your whole physical domain you have conservation, and inside each cell you have conservation. Now the question is, will you have conservation inside some region which is a proper subset of your cell? Can someone tell me?
Ma'am, if we have conservation inside a cell, then does it shouldn't it even mean that for every subset we'll have?
Actually, your how do you derive this equation? So inside this whole cell, any rate of change of some quantity is equal to the flux of that quantity moving outside. Does that hold for this small region? That is, if you consider this length, will the rate of change of some quantity be equal to the flux going to this flux at the interface? Will it happen? I mean, just because you're ensuring that it happens in this big region, will it happen in this region as well? We have already ensured that in this whole region it's happening, and in this whole region it's happening. That way we can say that in this big region we'll have conservation, because we have some cancelling of fluxes here, and any rate of change of quantity inside this will be equal to the fluxes from this point. So that way we can say this. But will it be possible to say that because we have conservation in this region, that is, any rate of change of quantity in this region is equal to the fluxes at the interfaces? Does that ensure that any rate of change of quantity here is equal to the fluxes at the interfaces?
Ma'am, if we take the reverse analogy, like we can also assume that the cells could be formed of small pieces inside, and in that way we can build up the cell with the fluxes for those two interfaces.
Yeah, we can build, but in that case, if we need to ensure conservation here itself in order to have conservation for a cell, but ensuring conservation for a cell, will that ensure conservation for this small region? We can always have small regions, but will ensuring conservation for a big region ensure conservation for a small region?
I don't think so, ma'am. No.
Okay. Why so?
Ma'am, because if like if you're able if we ensure it for a bigger region, then as you told, we can build up for the regions bigger than that.
Yeah.
But inside that particular like inside that region, if we take up a small quantity, then how do okay
Yeah. We cannot say we'll have conservation in some small set of a bigger set. Yes. So because we cannot directly do this cancellation, because we don't know whether there will be conservation inside this small region. We cannot say that there will be or there will be not, but we cannot say for sure that there will be conservation, because we have conservation in the bigger region. But if we have conservation in some region, for some other bigger region, we can say that there will be conservation. But if you go in a smaller scale, we cannot say that there will be conservation there also. For that, we need to make a separate analysis and try to ensure conservation in a much smaller region. So just because there's conservation in a bigger region, we cannot say that there will be conservation in a much smaller region than that. Yeah.
okay.
Ma'am, actually, I didn't fully understand why that is so. Because if we consider the cell that we have, then we can say that there is conservation because the fluxes is equal to the rate of change of the quantity inside.
Yeah.
But that But that flux change is happening throughout the cell. So why doesn't it apply to a subset of the cell
Yeah,
also?
it's happening throughout the cell. If you are at a bigger region, there is some U is being changed throughout the cell, and according to this change, some G is going out, and those are equalizing each other. So this is happening for a cell. But if you consider some other smaller region, here again U is changing, here again something is going out. But will you be able to say that this change here is equal to something that is going out here in that time? That is the rate of change of some quantity U in this smaller region is also equal to the fluxes G going through these interfaces, small interfaces. I mean, that we don't know. I mean, is
Like this is the part I'm not getting. How is it that we don't know that it's conserved using this
okay.
smaller set?
So is it like it might happen at certain places, but like the effect is cumulative because it is happening at certain places inside that particular cell, but not at all,
Yeah,
not at all places.
yeah.
So we cannot say whether that place, like that subset, will act as like the conservation will be applied there or not.
We don't know because let's say du by dt in this big region is some 10, and in this region we have some g of u going out is 5 and 5. Now consider a much smaller region than that. Here du by dt uh, may be bigger than this 10 or smaller than this 10. You're getting it because the rate of change of here we may have some 15, and here we may have some 5 or 1. All of those cumulative thing is this u, and that rate of change is 10. In this smaller region, it may be either bigger than 10 or smaller than 10. Okay, let's just say it's bigger than 10 here. Now thing going out need not be all, you know we have only ensured that through our equations we have only ensured this part. Just don't consider the physics. Okay, in physically that will be happening. Physically you have conservation everywhere, but just mathematically if you look at it, we are only ensuring this thing. Okay, through our equations only manage this part. That is, any rate of change of quantity is equal to the flux through this bigger region. Our equations only ensure this. But if you consider a region much smaller than that, then du by dt may either be large or bigger, smaller than this 10. Okay, and g of u here need not be such that it satisfies this whole thing. It can be some 7 and 5. Okay, and when it goes for a larger scale, it may become 5 and 5, and this whole thing may become du by dt may become 10. Okay, we are through our equations we are only ensuring this, but inside there may be a different balance such that things get satisfied only at the outside and not at the inside. This possibility is still there, but physically you will always have conservation at any region. But mathematically, as of now, we have only ensured that this equation only will be valid. But that doesn't mean that this part will also be valid. If we want this part to be valid, then we need to construct cells in this scale, and we need to ensure conservation at this level. Okay. Is it clear, or you still have doubts?
Yes, ma'am. I understood this. Ma'am, then in the first place, how did we define conservation for each cell?
Okay. Here, yeah, at this point, this is a control volume. This, you got it, right? You have this conservation law. Any rate of change of u inside this control volume here is equal to the flux through that control volume. This is for a big physical domain. But now when you go for a cell, you're in this region. So now here, this equation actually defines conservation for the cell. So any rate of change of quantity in this region between xj minus half and xj plus half is equal to the flux through xj plus half and xj minus half. So here we have defined conservation for a cell. So we started with conservation of some u inside a cell. So because of starting point, we have conservation at some bigger regions as well because of this telescopic collapsing thing. But in some smaller regions, we may not have. But physically, we'll be having, from the physical point of view, we will always have. In fluid mechanics, we have conservation at any small point that is up to the continuum level. But you know, in this equation only ensures conservation in this cell, but it doesn't ensure conservation for a smaller scale. If we need for a smaller cell, then we need to start from that point only. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, that's clear now. Thanks.
Okay, fine. So now that we are in finite volume method, like we have just gone through some of the things, like some of the technicalities of finite volume method, like, you know, integral form. Then we went to piecewise polynomial approximation, wherein you are actually taking your value of u at the cell centers only, and you either do piecewise constant or piecewise linear approximation. Then we talked about reconstruction of fluxes, and there we saw adding numerical diffusion as one thing and upbending as the other thing. And then we went to this telescopic collapsing thing, the discrete conservation, global conservation. The conservation inside each cell led to conservation of the whole of U inside the whole domain. So now then we talked about how Rankine-Hugoniot conditions can be easily satisfied in your integral form of conservation law, that is the finite volume framework. So these are some of the technicalities of finite volume method. So now let us move to this some numerical schemes. These are some finite difference schemes only, but you know, these are some of the schemes from the point of view of linear convection equation, and later we'll be doing upwinding based on these. So for compressible flows, these are some basics. So we'll just go through these for today, and then from next time we'll mix up both CFD for compressible flows and CFD for incompressible flows. Primarily we'll start with compressible flows and then go to incompressible flows. So here consider this linear convection equation, dou u by dou t plus c dou u by dou x equals 0, and the initial condition u of x comma 0 equals u naught of x. So now we have seen initially, we have seen earlier when we were doing PDEs that the exact solution for this problem is this one. It's just a traveling wave solution. So your u of x comma t is equal to u naught of x minus ct. So that is, you draw characteristics and you trace the foot of the characteristic. Foot of the characteristic means, you know, you have xt plane and you have some characteristic. So if you are at this point, if you need to find the solution value for u at this point, u of x comma t, you trace the foot of the characteristic, that is this point, that is the initial line, u at some x minus ct comma 0. So this is that point. So you trace the foot of that characteristic, and then the solution at this point will be equal to the solution at this point. So this is something that we have seen earlier. So based on this, we can find the solution at different time steps. So we can say that if you have t plus delta t over here and t at here, so you can say that u at xj comma t plus delta t will be equal to u at this point, xj minus c delta t comma t. So let's say if this is t plus delta t and this is t, so u at some xj comma t plus delta t will be equal to u at xj minus c delta t comma t. So that is given by this expression. So this is something that you know from the exact solution. So we are doing this. So now this same picture is actually this one in a different form. So we have 3 points, xj minus 1, xj and xj plus 1, and they are at different time steps, t and t plus delta t. So now you can have either this characteristic or this characteristic passing through the point xj. So now the foot of the characteristic traces to different points p, and they are at a distance c delta t from xj. Like we'll either have we'll just be having one of these just to represent and drawing both, but we'll essentially be having either one of these. So now u at j n plus 1 is equal to up at n, right? This is a characteristic. So u at xj n plus 1 is equal to up at n if either of these up at n. So I'm just tracing the foot of the characteristic. So now any value of this is something you know from the exact solution. That is this point, this uj at n plus 1 equals up at n is something you know from the exact solution. Now up at n is something you do not know. So essentially in your numerical scheme, you are storing values at xj minus 1 and xj plus 1. You will not know what the value of value of u is at p. So that you need to approximate. You need to do some approximation using these points xj, xj minus 1 and xj plus 1. So to find up at n, I'm using uj minus 1 and xj. So that will be u at xj minus 1 plus dou u by dou xj, and this distance is delta x minus c delta t. So that is going over here. And now I'm doing some linear interpolation using uj and uj minus 1 because I'm just considering this p and not this p. So for this p you have c greater than 0. Okay. So let's see what kind of a scheme we get using this approximation. So just being inspired from exact solution, we are finding a numerical solution. So u at j n plus 1 will be equal to up at n, but up at n is not known. So for that we are doing a numerical approximation using the values of u at different points, j minus 1 and j. So this is where numerical part comes in, wherein we do some approximation to find up at n. So here this is the equation that we got, and uj at n plus 1 equals uj minus 1 at n, and this upon simplification becomes something like this, and here we can cancel some quantities and we finally get an equation like this. So this is essentially a forward in time and backward in space. So here, since we started with this point where c is greater than 0, and when c is positive, we said FTBS scheme is the first order stable upwind scheme. So here again, with this kind of being inspired from exact solution and using numerics to approximate up at n, we find we again get a first order upwind scheme. We essentially get the FTBS scheme. And suppose we had used c less than 0, then here we'll be having uj plus 1 coming up, and we'll essentially end up with FTFS scheme, forward in time and forward in space. So this kind of interpolation gives us a first order upwind scheme. And then let us do linear interpolation. So now this is just a linear interpolation using uj and uj minus 1. So instead of that, let us do linear interpolation using uj minus 1 and uj plus 1. So here we, in this dou u by dou x at xj point, we just used uj and uj minus 1. Instead of that, let us use uj plus 1 and uj minus 1. That is a central difference instead of a backward difference. So when we do that, we get another scheme. So that scheme is known as Lax-Frederick scheme. So this is a popular scheme. This is one of the very first schemes that came in hyperbolic equations for especially for linear convection equation. This is one of the very first schemes that came. Okay, for nonlinear conservation equations, you will have a different equation. G of u will be nonlinear, whereas in our linear convection equation, G of u was just Cu, a linear function only. Here it's a nonlinear function of u. So in this case, the same equation transforms to something like this. So this C goes inside, and that becomes C. We get, instead of uj plus 1 minus uj minus 1, we get g at j plus 1 minus g at j minus 1. So this is again the Lax-Frederick scheme for some nonlinear conservation law. So here, if we look at it, central difference is directly done for the fluxes without, getting the wave speeds and without putting the system in non-conservative form. So here we have a scheme, and here G of u and G of u, that is the fluxes, are at J plus 1 and J minus 1. They are not at interfaces. They are at cell centers only. So, this whole equation can obviously be used all the time without any further working out of fluxes at interfaces. So just a minute, I'll charge the laptop. So yeah, you now have a scheme that does not have any quantities evaluated at interfaces. All of them are at cell centers only, so you can directly use this scheme. And in this scheme, you're not putting the equation in non-conservative form. There is no problem of dealing with wave speeds and upwinding and all. I told you that there will be problem in doing upwinding because we cannot easily put the system in non-conservative. For doing upwinding, we need to know the wave speeds, and for that, we need to put the system in non-conservative form. So without putting the system in non-conservative form, how to do the upwinding is another question. So here, this is a scheme wherein you did not go through all those problems and just have your fluxes evaluated at the cell centers itself. So this is Lax-Frederick scheme, and this is for scalar conservation law. We have seen this for just linear convection equation, and then for any nonlinear conservation law where G of u is any nonlinear function. If G of u is just C into u, you get back linear convection equation. If G of u is any nonlinear function, it's a general nonlinear conservation law. All our inviscid Burgers equation comes inside this category only. So for any such equation, so suppose if your G of u is half u squared, then to evaluate these things, you can use this function, because you will anyways be knowing u at j plus 1 n and u at j minus 1 n. Using those, you can evaluate G at j plus 1 just by using half uj plus 1 squared, and all of them are 10. So this way you can evaluate these fluxes. Suppose if you know the function G of u, that is, you will anyways be knowing this function G of u for any given conservation law that you have. So accordingly, you can use the form of G of u to evaluate this G at j plus 1 and G at j minus 1. Because you know the value of u at j plus 1 and j minus 1, you can evaluate G at j plus 1 and j minus 1. So, and now let us go to systems of conservation law, the same Lax-Frederick's method for systems of conservation laws. So just consider some general system, dou u by dou t plus dou g by dou x equals 0. And for Euler's equations, this will be u equals rho u and rho e, and g equals rho u p plus rho u squared and pu plus rho u e. So this is the flux vector, and this is the conserved variable vector. So here the same, the same Lax-Frederick scheme transforms into something like this. Here again you have the same thing, except that your variables are all vectors instead of scalars. So for Euler's equations also, you can comfortably use this Lax-Frederick scheme to find the solution. And this is one of the earliest methods, and of all methods based on 3-point stencil. So here this method is based on 3-point stencil, right? You have j plus 1 and j minus 1. You have to find some value at some point xj, you need to use three values, three values at xj plus 1, xj minus 1 and xj. So this way it becomes a 3-point stencil problem, and a Lax-Frederick's method uses 3-point stencil, and of all methods that use 3-point stencil, Lax-Frederick's method will have maximum numerical diffusion. People have proved this. Since this is one of the earliest methods, and it's okay that it has maximum numerical diffusion. Later on, improvements have been made just by using 3-point stencil. We can have schemes that can have less numerical diffusion than this Lax-Frederick scheme. So this is something that we obtain by using linear interpolation between uj plus 1 and uj minus 1. Okay. Any doubts here?
No, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. So now let us use quadratic interpolation instead of linear interpolation. So we got this thing from our exact solution itself. So uj at n plus 1 equals up at n. So now to approximate up at n, we use three different points, uj minus 1, uj and uj plus 1. So let us first do some quadratic interpolation about uj minus 1. So that has been done. We have this Taylor series expansion up to second order. Then upon some simplifications, it becomes something like this. So this is this I don't know if there is some scheme like this, but this can also be treated as some numerical scheme, but provided it is stable, we are obtaining something. Okay, so this is some average of uj, average quantity, and here you have a forward difference and then a central difference. So I'm not sure if this is some scheme or not, because just to show that anything can be derived by using any kind of interpolation, I've done this. So just like we do linear interpolation, we can also do quadratic interpolation. So now that we have seen Lax-Frederick's method, now let's move on to Lax-Wendorf method. So we have another scheme known as Lax-Wendorf method. It's a two-step scheme. It's better than Lax-Frederick's. It's second order accurate. People have given different interpretations of the Lax-Wendorf method. These are those two. Like Reschmeyer and Morton have given this predictor corrector step, and McCormack method, McCormack, he has given this predictor corrector step. So essentially, predictor corrector is like you evaluate, something at uj, something at time step n. Next, using all those values at time step n, you evaluate something at a different intermediate time step n plus half. And now you use that values at intermediate time step n plus half to find the values at time step n. So now these two steps together combined will give us one time step. So this is known as a predictor corrector method. First, it's not just, you cannot just say that it's at time step n plus half. It's like you're predicting the value for time step n plus 1 here, and then you're correcting it further in the next time step. So here essentially you're not using this delta t by 2 time step, but when you go for predictor corrector methods, you're actually evaluating you're predicting your value at time step n plus 1 first and then correcting it later. So this is known as the two-step Lax-Wendorf method. It's more accurate than the Lax-Friedrichs method, and these two steps, predictor corrector steps, may separately be unstable, but together when we solve them, they become stable. That is, first, a predictor step may lead to some instability and corrector step may lead to some different instability. And on the other side, together, they'll nullify and you get a stable solution. The errors don't grow. Maybe the errors grow in different directions so that they nullify and you get a good solution, the correct solution actually. So this is Lax-Wendorf method. So this is something I wanted to introduce. So next time we'll go for upwind methods, that is flux splitting and all. Then we'll go for CFD for incompressible flows, wherein we'll see simpler and all. The pressure correction methods. We had a problem with pressure, right, in incompressible flows. So to overcome that, people developed many schemes. So we'll see those also later on. So any doubts here? Questions?
No.
Okay, fine. So we'll stop here and meet next week. Yeah. So you don't have doubts, right? Is it? That's okay. Okay, fine. We'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.